Здравствуйте, товарищи. Welcome back to Russian Through Propaganda. Today is day 44, and now that we've added the instrumental case, there are no more cases to learn in Russian. So let's just review how each case in Russian is used. And as we do so, we'll look at some issues that may cause lingering confusion. The first is, what about the nominative versus the instrumental? That can be a little bit confusing sometimes. We basically know why from yesterday. Remember that the nominative is going to be used for subjects. Right, so look at some examples here. Это мой брат, right? There's the old pointing word, это, and we're pointing and basically naming my brother, nominative case. Он философ, okay? Он is the subject, and here we have a predicate noun that's an identity statement in the present tense, right? He is a philosopher. So both words, он and философ, are in the nominative. Similarly, он интересный человек, he is an interesting person. Okay, now as we learned yesterday, right, if we have something short of an identity statement in the present, Russian tends strongly toward the instrumental, right? So we have verbs that we learned yesterday like казаться, показаться, становиться, стать, оказываться, оказаться, and this kind of formal linking verb являться, which is always followed by the instrumental. Now we know that the instrumental can be used for instruments, right? Она пишет ручкой, он смотрит на меня волком. Okay, again, that sounds somewhat poetic, kind of a kind of fancy turn of phrase there, but again, you get the idea. It's not that he's literally a wolf, but he's acting like one. He's looking at me like one. Он был адвокатом. He was a lawyer, right? Past tense. Maybe he's not one anymore. Она станет журналистом. She will become a journalist. There, after the verb to become, we have to use instrumental in Russian. Okay, some more examples. Он кажется странным. Моя дочка скоро будет мамой. Будь вежливым. There with the imperative, right? Be polite. Act polite. Он является президентом. Okay, finally, the instrumental often occurs with reflexive verbs, right? Especially if they're used passively. Now let's look at some examples here. Меня интересует история. History interests me. Okay, historia there is our subject, меня is our direct object. But if we use интересоваться, right, if we add to интересовать, the reflexive particle, we get expressions like я интересуюсь историей. We could read that passively and say, I am interested by history, literally. Right, so we'll talk more about this later, by the way, but when we get passive constructions in Russian, we'll often get the instrumental case to tell us by whom or with what something is done, or by what, right? Who, with or by. In this case, историей. I am interested by history. Okay, он занимается спортом. Literally, he occupies himself with sport. Right, he does sports, we could say in English. But compare that with мы заняли стол, right? We occupied a table, meaning we took up a table. Okay, let's read through a short text. I don't want to spend too much time on this. Hopefully you'll understand most of it. I'll just translate it, and let's look for examples of the nominative and instrumental. Мой сосед по комнате американец, но он занимается русским языком. Okay, сосед is nominative, that's the subject. Американец is a predicate noun, right? My neighbor is an American. No one занимается русским языком, but he busies himself with the Russian language, right? He does Russian, he studies Russian. Okay, and there русским языком in the instrumental. Когда он был маленьким, он даже не знал, что есть такой язык, но теперь он очень интересуется русской литературой, культурой и историей. Okay, when he was little, right? There's that past tense. He used to be little when he was little. Маленьким is in the instrumental. Он даже не знал, что есть такой язык. He didn't even know that such a language exists. Но теперь, but now he is very interested by Russian literature, literally, right? So интересуется русской литературой, культурой и историей, right? All of those words are in the instrumental. Он говорит, что он впервые заинтересовался русской культурой, когда прочитал роман Достоевского. He says that he became interested by Russian culture. Again, if we read it sort of literally, русской культурой in the instrumental, когда он прочитал роман Достоевского, when he read a novel of Dostoevsky. Достоевский сразу стал его любимым писателем. Okay, Dostoevsky is the subject. That's nominative, but he became his favorite author. Okay, so there's the verb stать, which requires the instrumental, and there we see that любимым писателем, right? That's in the instrumental. Читать такой роман на русском языке казалось ему очень трудной задачей. Right, to read such a novel in the Russian language seemed to him a very difficult task. Okay, there's the verb казаться, right, which is always followed by the instrumental. It seemed a трудной задачей, right? There's the instrumental. It seemed to him a difficult task. Но он уже 2 года изучает русскую грамматику, а на прошлой неделе он прочитал рассказ Достоевского в оригинале. Right, but he's already been studying Russian grammar for 2 years, and last week он прочитал рассказ Достоевского в оригинале. He read a short story of Dostoevsky in the original. Слава Богу, текст оказался не таким трудным, каким он ему показался на первый взгляд. It's kind of a tricky sentence there, right? Thank God, praise to God, glory to God, literally. The text turned out to be not as difficult as it seemed to him at first glance. Okay, so what are the words here in the instrumental? Takim trudnim, right? It turned out to be not as difficult. And then in the second clause, we have the verb показаться, right? Which also requires the instrumental, right? Каким он ему показался на первый взгляд. So again, the translation might be, thank God, the text turned out to be not as difficult as it seemed to him at first glance. Okay, what about the nominative and the genitive? Well, we covered that in chapter 2, I think, mostly, right? The basic difficulty here is, remember, the nominative is used to express existence, for example, as the subject, right? The subject is whatever. But the genitive is used for non-existence, right? So, for example, у вас есть машина? Do you have a car? Да, машина есть. Okay, there's nominative case. We have a car. Literally, a car is. Right? Remember, you could say машина у нас есть if you wanted to make clear whose it is. Вот наша машина. Here's our car. And here we're simply using the a pointing word. Вот is kind of like это. We're showing something, and we're pointing to our car. Okay, but non-existence, remember we get this tricky subjectless idiom in Russian, нет plus the genitive. We know that in subjectless expressions, the verb form, if one is present, is always going to look like a neuter singular. For example, здесь нет станции метро. Здесь не было станции метро. Здесь не будет станции метро. Or, for example, у нас нет пива. We don't have beer. У нас не было пива. We had no beer. У нас не будет пива. Okay, note that all those nouns, stanция and piva, right, pivo, usually neuter, in the nominative are appearing here in the genitive. Okay, genitive also used to express possession. Да, это квартира моего отца. This is my father's apartment, the apartment of my father. Or other relationships between nouns that can usually be expressed using English of. Right? Начало фильма очень страшное. The beginning of the film is very scary. Okay, let's practice this important point by negating, saying the opposite of these examples, right? Instead of we have something or there is something, let's say that it doesn't exist. We don't have it. Здесь есть остановка автобуса. Right here, there is a stop of the bus, right? A bus stop. Okay, negated would be здесь нет остановки автобуса. There is no остановка here. There is no bus stop here. Number 2, в этом городе есть хороший бар. Okay, let's say there is no good bar in this city. В этом городе нет хорошего бара. We're just putting whatever the thing is into the genitive. Number 3, в нашем штате есть пляж. There's a beach in our state. Okay, what if there's not one? В нашем штате нет пляжа. 4, у моего соседа был велосипед. Okay, now we're in the past tense, right? My neighbor had a bike. Let's say he didn't have a bike. У моего соседа не было велосипеда. 5, у него была туалетная бумага. He had toilet paper. Okay, let's say he didn't. У него не было туалетной бумаги. У него не было туалетной бумаги. 6. У нас будет машина, right? Will we have a car? Okay, future tense. Let's say we won't have a car. У нас не будет машины. Number 7. Молока нет. Okay, that says there is no milk, so let's say the opposite. Есть молоко, or молоко есть, right? Milk is, meaning, yeah, there's milk. Okay, let's read another brief text. Завтра у нас будет вечеринка, так что мы сегодня ходили на рынок и в магазин покупать еду. Right, tomorrow a party will be at us, literally, right? So вечеринка is the nominative, right? Remember, all subjects are going to be in the nominative in Russian. Так что мы сегодня ходили на рынок. So today we went to the market, right? We made a round trip to the market and to the store to shop for food, right? Покупать, right? So here we're emphasizing the process of shopping for food. That's what we're about to tell about, so we picked the instrumental. У нас дома пива не было вообще, right? We had no beer at home, right? So пиво in the genitive. Водки и вина тоже не было. There was no vodka or wine either. Была у нас только бутылка кваса, right? The only thing we had was a bottle of kvass. Right? That's not going to get the party started. Kvass does typically have a very low amount of alcohol, like 1 or 2%, I believe, because it is a slightly fermented drink, right, made from bread. Anyway, so all we had was a butylka kvasa. Okay, so note there, nominative, right? Butylka kvasa, a bottle of kvass was, была у нас. А кто же пьет квас на вечеринке? But who drinks kvass at a party? Okay, look at the zha there. That's an emphatic particle. We haven't talked about that much yet, but here it basically lends emphasis to any word that precedes it. So кто же, who on earth, we could say in English, who on earth drinks kvass at a party? На рынке мы купили хлеб, колбасу, сыр и икру. At the market we bought bread, sausage, cheese, and caviar, right, accusatives. А потом мы пошли в супермаркет Перекресток. Next, we set off for the supermarket Перекресток. That literally means intersection. It's a supermarket chain in Russia. Это любимый магазин моего друга. That's my friend's favorite store. Там мы купили бутылку хорошего вина и еще бутылку шампанского. Okay, so here is the genitive with quantities, right? There, we bought a bottle of good wine. Right, again, any word in Russian that's in the genitive will usually translate into English using of. And also, or literally still, еще, right, we still bought a bottle of champagne, бутылку шампанского. Шампанское is a neuter singular adjective, right, champagne. And it's understood to modify вино, right? Шампанское вино. But again, вино would normally be used. Все будет как надо. Everything will be the way it should. У нас будет даже торт. We'll even have a cake. Right? So торт there in the nominative, right? Cake will be at us. We will have cake. Начало вечеринки в 8 часов. The beginning of the party is at 8 o'clock. Бог знает, когда она закончится. God only knows when it will be over. Okay, so what about the accusative and the genitive? Я этого не знал, не пей колы, я не читал этой книги. Okay, this is something I think we may have touched on very briefly. It's not really a rule, although traditionally it may have very likely been taught as one, right? Basically, what case do we expect to see with direct objects in Russian? Of course, the accusative, right? That's what we learned in this book. That's what we would normally expect in Russian nowadays. But direct objects of negated verbs will often appear in the genitive. Now, nowadays in Russian, there's not really a rule for this, the way there is, for example, in Polish, by the way. So we could say, sort of like the other day, we were talking about this strong tendency to see predicate nouns or predicate adjectives in the instrumental. We could say similarly that there's a very strong tendency to see the genitive case used for direct objects of negated verbs. Again, if we go back 50, 100 years, this would have been a much, much stronger tendency and really almost a rule. But nowadays, there's more gray territory. Let's just look at some examples here again. Я этого не знал. I didn't know that. right? So я не знал, I didn't know, and then это is sort of the object. But you see here we're getting этого, the genitive. Не пей колы, right? Don't drink cola. Okay. Now, with some of these, this tendency may be even stronger if you get some kind of a partitive idea there, right? So we could say maybe don't drink any Coca-Cola, period, right? Or we could think maybe don't drink of it. Uh, in that case, maybe even more likely to get the genitive with this negated verb. Я не читал этой книги. Okay, that may sound a little more formal, right? I haven't read this book. Uh, we could say я не читал эту книгу, right? I haven't read this book with the accusative case. Okay, so generally for direct objects, you're well advised just to use the accusative the way we've learned, but to watch for genitive direct objects of negated verbs, especially when you're reading formal Russian, especially again if it's older literature, you're going to see that very often. And also just to listen to it in certain set phrases. One simple example, it actually isn't that important because you can barely hear the difference. But the word понятие, which means an understanding or a concept, Russians say, for example, я понятия не имею, right? I have no idea. I have no understanding. Я понятия не имею. Okay, and that'll be spelled понятия, right? Because it's the object of a negated verb, я не имею, right? Я понятия не имею. And so there's an example of, we could think of that as a kind of a set phrase that, and again, note what's happening here is we have this negation, and we just reviewed how the genitive is so strongly associated with non-existence, negation, not having any of something. And so generally what we know about Russian grammar allows us to conceptualize why we could see this at all, right? Why we could see direct objects of negated verbs appear in the genitive. Okay, but let's move on now. I don't want to talk too much about this, but just watch for that as you continue to study Russian. Okay, let's remember accusative forms. This is something that always trips people up. Masculine inanimate nouns. Новый стол, for example. Genitive нового стола. Okay, what are these nouns doing in the accusative? Well, if they're inanimate, they're going to look just like the nominative. Right, so look at how there's новый стол could be nominative or accusative. Animates, right, like новый студент, the genitive is нового студента, and so is the accusative, right? So remember, masculine animates in the accusative, they look like genitive forms. What about feminines? Well, they had their own special rule, right? A to u or я to you in the accusative, right? So новая книга, genitive новой книги, accusative новую книгу. Now that same rule applies for feminine animates, right? So just keep in mind that even though there are feminine animates, we don't know any rules now. We don't know any case endings where that really matters. Now in book 2, when we get to the plural, we'll see that feminine animates are important, and for this very reason. In the plural, the accusative is going to look like the genitive for feminine animates as well as masculine animates. But for now, just doing singular case forms, right? Новая студентка, genitive новой студентки, accusative новую студентку. And neuter, новое мыло, genitive нового мыла. Neuters are always going to be inanimate. Their accusative will always look like the nominative. Okay, so let's give some accusatives here, some direct objects, and we've got to watch out for masculine nouns. Remember, their forms are going to look like genitive forms. Okay, so мы купили, we bought these things. We bought a новый журнал, a new magazine, and a нового щенка, right? A new puppy. Мы купили нового щенка, animate. Он часто покупает, he often buys expensive wine and a can of caviar, or a little jar of caviar. Он часто покупает дорогое вино и банку икры. Банку, that's your accusative. Now note that икры, that's expressing a quantity, or an of idea, a jar of caviar. So that икры part is not going into the accusative, right? Only banka. He bought a jar of caviar. Banku икры. They're reading a Russian newspaper, or they're reading Mayakovsky. Okay, so keep in mind, if you're reading an author, especially for present purposes, a male author, we've got to watch out because, right, as a direct object, they're going to look like genitive forms. Они читают русскую газету, Or они читают Mayakovskого. Right, his name is adjectival. We're going to read Mayakovsky in the spring, by the way, in book 2. Onu, little typo there in the book. It should be он увидел or они увидели. An old friend and an old male friend, old female friend. Okay, so starого друга, that's masculine animate. Starого друга and старую подругу. Старую подругу. Они съели, they ate all the caviar and the entire cake, the whole cake. Всю икру and весь торт, inanimate. They drank up the whole bottle or all the milk. Они выпили целую бутылку, right, feminine, все молоко, neuter. Она хорошо знает наш город, right, that's inanimate, right, stays the same. Or she knows our professor well, that's animate, so it's going to look like genitive, нашего профессора. We were waiting for these people, okay? Мы ждали нашу сестру, feminine, and нашего отца, right? Animate, masculine animate. I see your family. Я вижу твою семью, feminine. I see their lawyer, okay? That's animate. Я вижу их адвоката. Now, here are just two examples with this negation, right? So let's try to put these in the genitive after the negated verb. Мы не понимаем. Мы не понимаем этой теории. Or мы не понимаем вашего вопроса. Okay, so again, maybe something to watch out for, that type of thing, but not heard too terribly often in speech, although you certainly can hear it. But watch for it in formal printed Russian, written Russian. Okay, so let's read one more text here and look for accusative and genitive forms. And I don't think there are really all that many genitives in this text, but again, these little texts just they're pretty simple, hopefully, and it's worth looking at every noun in there and thinking, what case is it? Why are we using that case? And remember, whenever you're reading any Russian text, you've got to look at the case endings, right? It's very simple to hear that, but it's another thing to get in that habit, right, and look at the case endings instead of relying on word order the way we're used to doing in English. Значит, у нас вчера была вечеринка. So yesterday we had our party, right? The party was at us. We had a party. Мы с женой, right? We with wife, that is, my wife and I, right? Remember that idiom? Купили все, что нужно было. We bought everything that we needed. Okay, so все is the direct object there. Мы купили все. Accusative, что нужно было. That everything that was necessary. Даже посуду помыли, right? We even washed the dishes. That's a nice touch, right? When you're planning a party, right, to wash those dishes. Okay, посуду is in the accusative, right? Еще белье постирали. We even did the laundry, right? So белье. And here this could basically means the sheets, right? The bed sheets, right? I guess for their guest bed. Еще белье постирали. Может быть, кто-нибудь захочет у нас остаться, чтобы не ехать домой так поздно. Right? Maybe someone will want to stay with us in order not to head home so late. Okay. Были на вечеринке мой старый друг из школы, Коля, и его жена. Right, so he was at the party. Мой старый друг из школы. There's a genitive, right? With is школы. И его жена. Ее зовут Аня. They call her Anya. Her name's Anya. Мне показалось, что я ее видел в прошлом году в театре, но она меня не помнила. Right, it seemed to me that I saw her в прошлом году, in the last year, right, prepositional, last year, in the theater, prepositional, но она меня не помнила, but she didn't remember me. Им очень понравился салат, который мы приготовили. Right, the salad that we made, который мы приготовили, really pleased them. It was very pleasing to them, right? Remember that use of the dative им? Все ели и пили весь вечер. Everyone ate and drank all evening. Весь вечер, by the way, is in the accusative. That's the time expression, right? Expressing duration, right? For the whole evening. Весь вечер все ели и пили. Всю икру съели и все шампанское выпили. Okay, so there are a couple of direct objects. Всю икру, все шампанское. They ate all the caviar. They drank all the champagne. конце вечеринки я сказал тост. За нас, ребята. Okay, at the end of the party, вечеринки, right, is genitive. Я сказал тост. I said a toast. That's accusative. За нас, ребята. Here's to us, guys, people. Right, and za nas, za here takes the accusative as well. Okay, let's compare the dative and the nominative, right? Dative, as we know, the main use is for indirect objects, right? So, for example, я подарил маме телевизор. I, subject, nominative, gave to mom, dative, телевизор, direct object, accusative. Я купила отцу газету. Он рассказал мне анекдот. Они нам показали фотографию. Фильм мне кажется хорошим. Right? The film seems interesting to me, right? We saw that the other day. Мне, right? Of course, хорошим in the instrumental. Я всегда помогаю соседу. Okay, there the verb помогать, if you recall, it simply takes the dative, right? So we just have to learn that as part of how we use the verb помогать. It's followed by the dative. By the way, смерть мировому империализму, death to global imperialism. Okay. Мне хорошо, I feel good. Okay, remember this is reviewing these somewhat tricky subjectless expressions that involve some of them here an adverb, right? Мне хорошо, мне было хорошо, мне будет хорошо. Okay, so similarly, we reviewed a moment ago those subjectless expressions with нет, right? Those non-existence expressions with the genitive. Same thing here, subjectless expressions, but now involving the dative. Мне хочется пить. I feel like drinking. There's a subjectless verb хочется. Мне захотелось пить. Same verb, but now perfective in the past. And there again, we see the subjectless verb is always neuter singular. Мне захотелось пить. Okay, let's give a few translations. We'll give the child chocolate. Мы дадим ребенку, indirect object, dative, шоколад, right, direct object, accusative. They always give us wine. Они всегда дают нам, right, dative, вино, accusative. He really helped us. Okay, it sounds like a one-time thing. We don't know for sure, but let's assume he helped us one time. Он нам очень помог. Right, so nam is dative, and then, right, because we're using it with помочь. She showed me the dog. Она мне, right, dative, показала собаку, accusative. 6, he'll show her the cat. Он ей, right, to her, dative, he'll show her the cat. Он ей покажет кошку. They bought us a cake. Они купили нам торт. Or они нам купили торт. Right, nam is the indirect object, торт is the direct object. I'll buy her expensive caviar. Я ей, right, indirect object, her, ей, куплю, I'll buy her. Я ей куплю дорогую икру. Right, there's our direct object. Okay, now let's look at some subjectless expressions and repeat them in the past and future, right? These are tricky. Remember, there's literally no subject here in the Russian. Нам скучно на лекции. Okay, we feel bored. Past tense would be нам было скучно. Future, нам будет скучно. Remember, the verb form has got to look like genitive, neuter singular, right? Было, будет. Ему трудно читать. It's hard for him to read. Ему было трудно читать. Right? It was hard for him to read. Ему будет трудно читать. It will be hard for him to read. 3, нам есть хочется. Okay, there's that kind of funny verb хочется, meaning there is a desire, there is a wanting, and we feel it. Нам, right? We feel like eating. Нам хотелось есть would be the past tense. Хотелось. Again, note that neuter singular form. Again, here we're using the reflexive particle as well. Okay. Somewhat less commonly heard in the future. It's just kind of weird, but let's practice it. We will feel like eating. Нам будет хотеться есть. Okay, again, that's a little bit, you don't really hear that, but again, just for the practice sake of looking at the grammar, that's what it would be. Нашему другу плохо. Our friend feels bad. He felt bad would be нашему другу было плохо. He will feel bad. Нашему другу будет плохо. Okay, another poster. Каждый коллективу, коллектив каждому. Or it's sort of like all for one and one for all. Each person, каждый, as in каждый человек, коллективу, right, dative, meaning for the collective, right, the collective, and then коллектив, the collective, for every person, каждому человеку. Right, so again, as in so many of these posters, sort of like the death to global imperialism, right, we can express all these ideas just by manipulating the case endings, right? We don't need verbs in any cases, and sometimes not even prepositions, right? Just case endings. Okay, that's it for today. So until next time, до свидания, товарищи.